Hey everyone.
All right, coming through loud and clear.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as Matt said, I'm the engineer with the Operator Training and Certification Unit. Um, we'll be presenting on public water supply ethics today. And with me today is Brianna Moore and James Zellinger, that they can do a quick introduction themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Brianna Moore. I work in operator training and certification. I'm an environmental quality analyst, and I'll be presenting later on.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Zellinger. So I'm a detective with Department of Natural Resources Law Enforcement Division in the Environmental Investigations section. I do all the criminal investigations for Eagle out of their Kalamazoo district, so down in Southwest Michigan. So I'll have a few slides later on in the presentation as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the presentation. So first, we're gonna go into some definitions, what values are, moral values, ethics, how they're defined. Then we're going to go into some ethics for operators in terms of a code of ethics that we have found across multiple documents and associations. Then we'll go into some exam application, misrepresentation and falsification. Then we'll go into rules on ethics, behavior, and then followed by some case studies. So let's dive right into the basic definition. So values, they are individual beliefs that motivate people to act one way or another. So for those managers on here today, I want to ask, what kind of values do you look for when you're interviewing a candidate for a job position, right? Feel free to put them in the chat as I name some of these off. So some good values that we look for could be, that they're responsible, they're accountable, they're honest, they're optimistic, trustful, right? Respectful, loyal, committed, patience. All these are good values that we look for in a candidate. So moral values are just a set of these values, and um, they are a set of these values that we live and act by day to day and help us make decisions on what is right and what is wrong, right? So moral values, they are deeply embedded into our individual conscience, and they are shaped by factors such as your upbringing, your culture, your religion, right? Your personal experiences. And again, moral values are the rules you use to guide your behavior and your thinking. Ethics are the rules and standards that are set by external bodies, such as professional organizations, by cultures, by societies, right? So ethical behavior is when an individual within an organization is following the moral standards and rules set by that organization in everyday activities. Now, different professions such as doctors, lawyers, professional engineers, water operators, they will have different code of ethics that are, followed in their organization every day. Now, there may be instances and times when conflicts between your personal moral values and your work ethics or rules can occur. Now, just as a high level, for instance, even if a doctor personally believes that his patient has a right to euthanasia, he can't perform this procedure because of his ethical standards, right? Similarly, a lawyer who knows that his client is guilty of murder probably believes that such a crime is a terrible thing to do. Nonetheless, the ethics of his profession force him to defend his client no matter what. And um, so, yeah, as I stated, there will be times when sometimes, those personal moral values conflict with your ethical um, code of ethics. Um, and with that, I mean, we're looking for uh, operators that have integrity, and that is the quality of having honest and strong moral principles. So, as an operator in charge, you are a certified operator who are continuously making decisions regarding daily operational activities of the system, and that will directly impact the quality and quantity of the drinking water, right? So following the code of ethics for your profession is crucial when you're talking about the enormous population that drink your water. So why are operators certified? Of course, above all else, operators are certified to protect public health. And by having qualified operators running our water plants and distribution systems, that installs public confidence in the water that we drink and our tap water. And by having qualified operators, right, we need someone in that position to be accountable, to be responsible, and to act on emergency situations that can affect the public. Some of the responsibilities, and of course, it's not all encompassing, but some of the responsibilities of water operators, they're there to assure continuous and safe supply of water, right? They're there for to maintain the system, to protect the investment that the city, all the equipment, all the water treatment processes, right? To make sure that it's adequately maintained. Not only that, but the operator's responsibility is also to continue their education, continue their knowledge of the system, of upcoming technology, right? And above all else, to understand the system as a whole, right? You guys are the guys that are out there every day. You know exactly how a pump should sound, exactly how hot a pump should be as you're walking through your water plant, right? Make plans to continue improvement throughout your plant. As far as Eagle engineers and their responsibilities, Eagle engineers are responsible and they're making sure that systems are in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. They also respond to emergencies. They go through the permit process and reviewing permits, approving them. They also do a lot of correspondence with public agencies and also internal staff, right? And overall, engineers are reviewing the plans and documents to assure that there's adequate capacity moving forward with the system. So here's an example of a code of ethics. This is from the New England Waterworks Association. Just kind of wanted to go through some of these and touch on some of these code of ethics. The first one reads, at all times, recognize the primary obligation to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the public during the performance of duties. So again, to protect public health at all times, right? The second one is accept and perform direct supervision of water operation assignments only in the specific technical and level of operations where qualified by education and experience. This does not include circumstances of work performed under the direct supervision of licensed qualified coworkers, right? So if you're a water operator, you want to be performing tasks that you were trained on, that you have knowledge on. I mean, you're not gonna go and take apart a pump or do any electrical work within your plant if you're not qualified to do so, right? The next one here is to be completely objective and truthful in all professional reports, statements, or testimony. The operator shall include all relevant and pertinent information in such reports, statements, or testimony. And we'll see some case studies where this wasn't the true, but we want to be truthful with everything that we're submitting to Eagle, everything that we're writing down in our MORs, right? And if not, there could be some consequences, as we'll see here further in the presentation. The four, not falsify academic or professional qualifications, not misrepresent or exaggerate the degree of responsibility in prior assignments, duties, or accomplishments to enhance his or her qualifications and work, right? So this just from an employer perspective. I mean, if you're interviewing an operator and they're over exaggerating kind of the work that they've performed, I mean, it could also be a downfall when in reality they don't know 100% what they're doing. And in terms of the applications, I mean, we see some falsification in education and qualifications and job duties. So just making sure that you're, relaying the exact job duties and being truthful with what you do. Number 5, you present information to the appropriate regulatory agency in writing if the water system operator has knowledge or reason to believe that another licensed operator may be in violation of this code and shall cooperate with the regulatory agency in furnishing information, right? So just if you observe any, you know, any wrongdoing from other operators in process as you're working, feel free, reach out to Eagle as stated here, go call your district engineer and send us an email, call these situations out. Here's one of the code of ethics that I liked from the Pennsylvania Water Environment Association. This one deals with making sure that you're staying knowledgeable and you're continuing your education and sharing your experiences. This could be through attending webinars, kind of going out there and seeing what emerging technology is uh, is currently ongoing, how that could apply to your system, meeting other water professionals. I mean, there could be situations where a certain water professional out at an organization that you meet is dealing with a similar situation, and some networking could result um, in possible solutions that that you hadn't considered before. So. And this part of the Code of Ethics is this one comes from the Virginia section. This one is to have the right to demand adequate training and the ability to ask for help during events requiring assistance or in situations of uncertainty, right? So don't be afraid to speak out and say, I need more training in this area. I need to attend training classes, or I need help. This is too much work. So here is an incorporate. We're introducing a code of ethics section to our applications. This one here is from our level 5, and we'll have you initial and sign certain aspects. So this one's going to read, to the best of my ability, I will strive to provide good service, protect and preserve the public health, public property, and the environment by correctly operating water supply equipment, properly completing required reports, adhering to relevant state and federal regulations, continuing my education in the field, and working with my utility manager to establish clean operating policies for facilities I operate. Now, a couple of areas of misrepresentation, and when you guys are filling out these applications, I mean, be aware that there are phrases here where if there is any misrepresentation, it states here that you understand that misstatements or facts may result in forfeiture of all rights to certification, as we'll get into detail and further out along in the presentation. Act 399 does state the rules and what can occur if any misrepresentation is determined. So you as the individual are responsible for the information that you provide. And then here too, this is the educational requirements section of it. And we are, by Act 399, we do have the right to request any educational further documentation for verification purposes if there's ever a time that we deem misrepresentation of education on an application. So please make sure that you're being truthful with what you're submitting as far as your educational requirements. And one of the biggest areas as well, so the job applications that are submitted, they have to be signed and verified by either the immediate supervisor or the operator in charge. So you as the immediate supervisor or manager, you're aware that, there may be significant penalties for submitting false or misleading information, including forfeiture of your own certification, right? So you guys know exactly what your operator is doing, what your operator is not doing. If it's ever determined that, there's any false data, there could be big consequences for that. Overall, we try to establish a multi-barrier protection of public health There's multiple layers, right? The first layer is, operator training and certification by making sure that we have certified, qualified operators running our treatment systems. We establish a initial layer of protection, right? Another layer could be is the sanitary surveys that are conducted on your system, right? They dive deep into the water treatment process and uh, you know, uh, is a second layer. We also have through your sampling of water, you have you're continuously monitoring the quality of your water, and ultimately leads to that same protection of public health. Through your MORs, you're reporting the data that you have to Eagle, and any issues may be identified by your district engineer uh, or by other Eagle staff that require that require action, right? And then also continuing your education as an operator, maintaining your CECs, or going out there to trainings to further your knowledge and education on the water treatment process. So with that, I will hand it off to Brianna Moore, that she'll talk a little bit about rules, regulations, and some case studies.
All right, while Brianna is bringing up her presentation, Martin, I'm going to go ahead and run the second poll question. So poll number 2 is coming up. And that question is, if a supervisor is signing off on experience for an employee and the experience is found to be untrue, can the supervisor be found accountable and face enforcement action? So we'll let that run for a minute or so here. And while that's running, Martin, we had a question come into the hopper, and it says, is this an example of a code of ethics, or is this what Eagle is proposing? And I guess it looks like you're sharing examples of codes of ethics and then how it pertains to the operator training certification program and what you're sharing today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'll answer the question, and then I will share with everyone on the chat.
All right, so we're up to about 94%, which is pretty good response rate. Remember, if you are a certified operator and you are looking to get continuing education credits for this session that counts towards your certification renewal, then you do need to answer all the poll questions conducted. And I will review the closeout reports at the conclusion of the webinar. I do not know what your participation status is while we are in session. So it looks like we've stalled out at about 95%. And if you do not need CECs, you can certainly ignore the poll questions. But I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like about 94% say yes, the supervisor can be found accountable. 2% say no, and 5% are not sure. So Martin, you want to provide a follow-up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So these examples, so these are examples from code of ethics from a variety of organizations across the United States that just show, the ethics, the rules, the standards that operators should be following during their everyday activities. It's kind of the follow-up there.
Okay, and then on the poll question, the supervisor being accountable or face enforcement actions?
That is correct, yes. So if it is ever found that a supervisor is signing off on information that is found to be false, there can be consequences, and there can be revocation of their license as well.
All right, thank you, Martin, and take it away, Bree.
All right, so I'm going to talk about Part 19 and the consequences, examples of violations of ethics and follow that through with some case studies that we have seen in the category of ethical violations in the drinking water industry. So first, to start that off, I'm going to talk about Part 19, and where that really starts is the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which I'm sure everybody has heard of. And then that leads us to the Michigan Safe Drinking Water Act. So the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act lays out a baseline for the rules that states have to follow, and Michigan actually holds primacy to carry out those rules via the Michigan Safe Drinking Water Act. So what Michigan has done is we have the Safe Drinking Water Act, and we have to meet or exceed the federal standards. And within that, we get Part 19 of the Michigan Safe Drinking Water Act, which is where drinking water operator training and certification comes in. And that lays out those rules that Eagle must carry out and enforce, and that drinking water operators are operating under. So the next thing we're gonna see is water, the water supply industry as a whole. There's a lot of pieces, and we're gonna talk about how those interact, the water supply interactions. And there are a lot of different people, positions, agencies that come together to make the water supply operate and operate ethically. So, and those could be county officials, Eagle staff, local agencies, certified laboratories, the public, engineers, and operators. So all of those people and positions have to work together to have success in the collaboration and ethical actions to carry out the job. The next thing we're going to talk about is Part 19. Here you can see the actual rules from Part 19. And one of those things that I wanted to highlight is the suspension or revocation of certificates. So we have to follow these rules written in Part 19 when it comes to operator certification. And one is reasons why a certification may be suspended, revoked, or have enforcement action taken upon it. And that is A, the operator is incompetent or unable to properly perform the duties of a waterworks system operator. B, an individual or operator has committed fraud or has falsified an application, examination, report, or record with respect to a water supply. C, the operator has been negligent in the discharge of properly assigned duties or responsibilities with respect to a water supply. And D, an individual or operator has impersonated or misrepresented a certified operator or falsified a certification of completion or training record. So these are all reasons that there could be enforcement action taken upon a certification. And we're going to talk about all of these things and or examples here in this presentation. And they're part of the reason why we're highlighting this ethics training and bringing this to you. Another part of Part 19 that I wanted to highlight was the department shall provide notice of probation, suspension, or revocation in writing to the operator and to the owner of the public water supply where the operator is employed. So if there is ever any type of enforcement action or a notice that you need to receive, you would get that in writing, and also the public water supply will get that as well. And I think it's important to note that the certification that an operator holds is their certification, and they work for the water supply. The next thing I want to talk about is we're going to talk about some serious violations and or small things you might see as small, but they all matter, even if you think they're small. And we want you to know that there is a difference between mistake versus intent, and that we see that. There are certain things in an investigation that will show intent versus mistake, or you're not expected to be perfect. If you make a mistake, correct it. Cutting corners has consequences, and that shows intent. If there's ever an issue, or you don't know what to do, or you've made a mistake, communicate with others, your employer or Eagle or other operators to come in and help you. There is a difference between a mistake and misrepresentation or falsification, which I'm about to talk about and show some examples of. One of the first ethical violations is misrepresentation. So this can be seen in daily operations as a operator, and that could be that you're taking a sample and you do something to get a different result, such as chlorinating a sample or microwaving the sample. You could take a sample and use a different site than what you've documented. Saying you got it one place when really it was from another, in order to show a different result. It could also be the dilution of a sample to show a different result. So those are the daily operations. Those are some misrepresentations, and those are clearly ethical violations. Ethical violations such as misrepresenting your certification that you hold, impersonation as a certified operator. Someone could say, I'm a certified operator, and they're not. They could say that they hold a different level of certification or a different type of certification. All of those are misrepresentations. Or you could misrepresent the education or job description on your application. And that could be for a job, or it could be for the exam application to become certified. As you saw earlier, on the exam application, you fill that out, and we receive that and review it, and we do verify things. So when we're verifying the information you put on an application, if it's found to be false, we're going to call you, we're going to ask questions, and we're going to look for verification. So don't misrepresent your education or job description on those applications. Another ethical violation could be operating and signing documents as an OIC when you're not actually certified. Maybe you don't hold a certification, you don't hold the level of certification that you should, or you're operating while you're expired and still signing those documents. Once you're expired, you don't have the certification anymore, and you shouldn't be signing as an OIC. We're going to talk about ethical violations and falsification. So we just talked about misrepresentation, and now we're going to talk about falsification. In the daily operations, this could be falsifying sampling data. You put something totally different, or you just never took it, such as recording fake data. So you just fill the sheet out and turn it in, and that's an ethical violation and clearly falsification. Reporting based on false or non-existent data. In the certification category, you could falsify your application that we've talked about, falsify operator certificate, try to print your own or something like that. That is falsification. You could also falsify a CEC slip. Those are ethical violations when it comes to the certification that you hold. When to act on an operator's certification. Eagle recommends revocation of an individual's certification when we do not believe actions during the performance of job duties were motivated by the safety, health, and welfare of the public. That's really what operators are there to do. They're there to make sure that they do their job safely, that they are thinking about the health and welfare of the public. Every action that they do carries out those things. So you're protecting the public, and that's what we want to see. Potential consequences. We're going to talk about the potential consequences of ethical violations, such as those things we just talked about, misrepresentation and falsification. There are 3 different types of consequences: probation, suspension, and revocation. Probation terms are dependent upon an agreement with Eagle. Suspension is a determined amount of time before the operator can reapply to take an exam and become certified again. So you lose that certification, but at some point you would have the opportunity to come take the exam again and become certified. If a certification is revoked, you cannot reapply for 5 years to take the exam and become certified again. You could face fines, and you could face jail time. So these are all the possible consequences of ethical violations and enforcement action upon a operator's certification. Now I'm going to get into case studies. I'm going to tell you about some things that we've seen, ethical violations that have resulted in those consequences that we've talked about. And the first one is falsification of information on an application. A city in the UP was having issues finding a certified certain level operator, and a local firefighter trying to help applied and passed the S2. After the fact, an operator reported to Eagle that the firefighter had no experience in the water field and shouldn't have been allowed to take the exam. As a result, Eagle revoked his certification and he was let go. So here you see an example of someone who turned in an application that was clearly falsified. You have to have experience before applying to take the exam, and they didn't have any. So in the end, there was the ethical violation that resulted in enforcement, and the certification was revoked. Another case study is a falsification of lab reports. One supply sent in false lab reports. They duplicated reports from a certain lab for water quality sampling. A district analyst noticed when this lab report was turned in, and they reached out to the lab. Something on this lab report didn't look the same, and the lab confirmed that they had no record of the water sampling report that was submitted. Submitting reports. The most common submittal to Eagle is the monthly operating report, your MOR. You are responsible for understanding all the forms you fill out, sign, and submit. You are responsible for filling them out correctly and ethically. So if, those small things that you think, maybe it's just a small thing, they matter. And those are still ethical violations and could result in some form of consequences. A case study of experience falsification. A community operates both water and wastewater. A wastewater operator whose primary responsibility is in wastewater misrepresented himself on an application. The supervisor was caught in the situation because they signed off on the experience as a manager. So this manager knew they didn't work in water, they worked primarily in wastewater. But when the application was submitted, they said they worked more on the water side so that they could get more experience and qualify to take the exam. Both the supervisor and the operator received penalties in this case. The operator received revocation, and the supervisor was allowed to keep the lowest level certification from an F2 to an F4. So here you see both the operator and the manager who signed off on the experience received penalties for their ethical violations. Negligence of daily operations. This is another ethical area that you want to do the right things all the time. A water supply manager reported to Eagle they had an employee who was falsifying maintenance records. They had already let the individual go, but didn't want the operator using the certification at other facilities. If they acted unethically in this situation, it's likely that they could do that again. And that puts the public at risk. The operator was logging backwash of filters that had never occurred. It was caught on camera, and it takes about 45 minutes to backwash a filter, and the individual had left in less than 15 minutes. Operating expired. We have seen this where, not all operators know that the day after your expiration, you are expired and you no longer hold certification. You have a grace period to renew your certification, but you're no longer certified. So an operator knowingly operating as an OIC while certification has expired is unethical and can result in consequences. Acting as an OIC, you're still signing reports and documents that certified operators are supposed to sign. So if you're expired, don't continue to sign those reports and renew your certification. We've seen during enforcement, employer limits when it comes to the actions of an employee. Operators have said that they have the choices they made were due to the limits set by their employer. If you run into this, an employer says, we just don't have the money, or we don't have the time, we don't have enough employees, any of the reasons, work through those channels above you with the concerns. And if no one is able to do something, document any pertinent information so that you were trying your best in that situation. It's your certification that you hold, not your employer's. So the actions that you take affect you and the employer, but it is your certification. Cutting corners and small unethical actions can have a huge impact on operations and public health. Eagle is available anytime. Reach out to us if you have questions or concerns, if you don't know what to do, or anyone else in your workplace or that you think could be appropriate to help you. We have another case study. This one's out of state. It's the falsification of training records. So, enforcement or unethical things isn't just in Michigan. You can see that here. A Youngstown Water Department 2017 case where the water operator was caught falsifying certificates of trainees. There were 2 counts of forgery in this case, 2 counts of criminal noncompliance with the Water Act, and 2 counts of tampering with records. 26 employees pleaded guilty to falsifying their CECs. Certified operators' license were suspended and others were demoted. Now we're going to talk about engineering ethics and review. Engineers play a big part in the water operators or water supply. Part of that is through thoroughly reviewing permits and making sure that their permits are understood. Issuing the permit, some of the things they could do wrong could be issuing the permit without proper review or construction allowed with no permit. So these are all things to keep in mind as an engineer, or if you're also an operator, to make sure you're reviewing things well, that you understand the permit, and that you're issuing it with review. We have a case study of a failed equalization basin, and this is on the engineering side as well. The 2011 basin failure, the structure was built between 1994 and 1996. And following a period of heavy rain, the east wall of the equalization basin collapsed. 1 million gallons of wastewater were released. 2 employees were working in the control flow building 8 feet away were killed. Engineering study was conducted after the incident and revealed that the structure did not meet ACI 318 and ACI 350. It's unclear why the basin was not designed to standards or specification. So here you have a structure that was built but wasn't designed to standards and specification. It could have been any of those reasons that we had talked about before. You know, make sure you're reviewing those permits, and that you're following the guidelines that are set for these reviews. So and that's why we have engineering checks and balances. Checklists for permits. Professional engineer must sign off on permits and then review permits with a team. If you follow those checks and balances to make sure that you're doing all the things to begin with, then there might not be those failures like that equalization basin. Sanitary surveys is another way to identify issues and such as cross-connection issues, adding chlorine without reporting the dose or residual, to see if there are flooded well houses or general system issues. So those sanitary surveys play a big part in the engineering role, and also, you know, the operator role, to see if there's anything that either of them need to do or help with. So we're going to talk about, this is kind of a case study. This is something as operators and managers that is big, right? We test for certification twice a year, and the examination rules, those are big. So there have been cases of people bringing in programmable calculators to the exam and being used, and those are prohibited. So when you have a programmable calculator, we don't know what's in that programmable calculator, and you just can't have it with you. There have been situations where cell phones have gone off and the exam isn't scored if you are found with a cell phone on you. They're prohibited at the exam. So the best option is to leave that phone in your car on exam day. You shouldn't bring anything with you that has notes or stuff written on it. We do look for all that stuff, and we've had cases where after the exam has started, we've found those things, and then your exam is not scored, and you'll have to come back and retest, or if you're found to be cheating, you may have other consequences as well. And now we're going to talk about environmental investigation, and we have James Zellinger here to present to you.
Hi guys, yeah, as Bree mentioned, so I'm in the environmental investigation section. So just a little bit of background on who I work for. So we're part of Department of Natural Resources Law Enforcement Division. We handle Eagle's criminal investigations since they don't have a police agency of their own. There's a detective stationed in each of the Eagle districts around the state. And then, yeah, within, like I mentioned in the introduction, I'm assigned to Kalamazoo district down here in Southwest Michigan, and I handle all of Eagle's criminal investigations down here, including anything that the Drinking Water Environmental Health Division sends my way. So you can go ahead, Bree, and change slides. So as was mentioned earlier, the ethical violations, or just violations in general, of the Safe Drinking Water Act, there is a potential for jail time. I will tell you, Eagle staff, this is an absolute last resort when they actually refer a case over to me. Eagle, they want to resolve everything as civilly as they can through voluntary compliance and just people being honest and admitting to mistakes and correcting it that way. But if they are pushed to it, they will send a case over my way for an investigation, and then there are potential criminal penalties. So over on the left-hand side, you can see the excerpt from the Safe Drinking Water Act. any violations of the act or rules that are promulgated under the act are misdemeanor violations, and they can be punishable by fines of not more than $5,000 or up to a year in jail. And like it's stated there, that's the actual statute violations or any of the numerous rules that are promulgated by the department under the authority granted to them in the Safe Drinking Water Act. Then over on the right-hand side, we have an excerpt from the Michigan Penal Code, where here it just states a person who falsely makes, alters, forges, or counterfeits a public record. And then you can see in the bottom there where it's highlighted that offense is punishable, or it's a felony offense and is punishable by imprisonment of up to 14 years. So here's where any of the documents that you're filling out for Eagle, whether it be the MORs, any of your education experiences, anything you're submitting for recertification, the lab reports you're submitting, once Eagle has received those, they become a public record. And if you're found to be falsifying any of the information on those public records, you could be charged with felonies. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. Again, this isn't necessarily to scare you, it's just to show you what the criminal penalties could be for some of these ethical violations that we've talked about. And again, we understand that nobody's perfect. If you make a mistake, the biggest thing is you have to own up to it. Let Eagle know as soon as you're aware of it, because in order for a violation of the Safe Drinking Water Act to become criminal, I really have to see one of three things. There has to be some sort of criminal intent behind the offense. You have to have some knowledge of the offense taking place. It can't just be an accident or just a part broke and you weren't aware of it. You actually have to have knowledge that it's going on, or there just has to be some sort of gross negligence aspect to it that any reasonable person would realize that is unacceptable behavior. So go ahead, Bree, and move on to the next slide. So we'll just go over real shortly here a couple of case studies or from cases or investigations that I've handled personally here. This first one, the owner of a supply was the one that actually handled a lot of the annual testing in the fall. And this particular year, the owner, when he was collecting all of his samples to be sent to the lab for testing, he forgot to collect a sample for the partial chemistry test, which was required that year. And my investigation showed I don't think there was any intent behind this. He collected all the other required samples and had them tested properly. This, I think, was just an honest oversight. But when Eagle was reviewing the sample results, they realized this test or lab report for these tests was missing. So they just reached out to the supply owner and notified him, hey, I don't see results for these in our system. Do you have those? Can you send them to me? And had the owner just admitted, no, you know what, I honestly forgot that one. Let me run out. I'll get it as soon as I can and get it to you. They still would have been in violation. They probably would have got a violation notice issued to them. But that's not the route they ended up taking. They instead told the Eagle staff person who called them that, oh yeah, I took that sample. I'll get the lab report over to you right away. I just forgot to upload it. And then they went back to previous years and used old lab forms and old lab reports that reported partial chemistry test results. And they kind of fudged them all together to come up with what they thought looked to be a current reasonable lab report. And they submitted that to Eagle. And for several reasons, it was very easy to identify this as a fraudulent lab report. Both by the Eagle staff person reviewing it, myself, and then also the state laboratory staff reviewed it and pointed out additional errors in the report as well. ultimately, the owner of the supply was criminally charged and found guilty for several Safe Drinking Water Act violations. And this is, again, as kind of I mentioned, if they would have just been honest, yeah, they still would have been in violation. They probably would have got a violation notice, but that's probably as far as the enforcement would have went if they would have just owned up to their honest mistake. But instead, they tried to cover it up. And when they created that fraudulent lab report and submitted it to Eagle, that's where we got into the aspect that they exhibited the criminal intent to violate or cover up the mistake, and that's why it ultimately ended up in on my desk for an investigation. So go ahead, Bree. We can move on to the next one here. So in this, you can bring up all the points, Bree, and then I'll just talk through them. So I think that's all of them. So this is another one I handled a few years back. This started with the Eagle staff person was just reviewing this water supplies records and had identified that the operator in charge had a lapse in their operator certification. That was it was a significant lapse. It was past the grace period even. So at that point, they reached out to the municipality, notified them their operator was his certification had lapsed and that they needed to contract with a private company to serve as the operator while they worked on a recertification. And during that process, it was determined that they would do a site visit with the leaders of the municipality, the new contracted operator, the former operator in charge, and then Eagle staff as well. And during that site visit, that kind of opened a whole can of worms to all just the lack of maintenance and proper procedures and everything that was going on at the supply. Just some of the things that were identified. So even though iron and hardness levels were being reported to Eagle, during the site visit, they weren't able to actually identify any test kits in the facility. Later, they identified test kits or found them at a different facility within the municipality, but they were outdated by approximately 20 years. The contracted operator, he asked the former operator in charge to conduct a chlorine test for him, just so he saw how his system worked. And the former OIC took a while to find the test kit and then seemed very unfamiliar with how to operate it. And then he was also even collecting a sample from upstream of where the chlorine discharge into the system was happening at. And then a further search through records for the system showed that chlorine hadn't even been purchased by the municipality, and it was 5 or 6 years, I believe. And this obviously didn't match up with all the numbers that were being reported as far as how much chlorine was being injected into the system. And another thing that they identified was the iron filters had not been backwashed regularly, if not at all, for several years. In the filter room, they ended up having to use pipes of 4 to 5 feet in length to get enough leverage to even budge the valves at all. Eventually, they were able to work them free and get them to where they only needed a 1 or 2 foot length pipe, but it was pretty ridiculous. And then even in that filter room, when the contracted operator came in, it was kind of dark in that room, and initially he had thought that they had installed AstroTurf underneath the filters for some reason, but it turned out it was just mold and moss that had grown in there from just the lack of maintenance and upkeep, and they had to scrape all that off the concrete floor with the shovels. And then another thing that through my investigation and my record search in this case, I identified, going back several years, numerous MORs that had been submitted to Eagle that were perfect or duplicates or matches from previous MORs that had been submitted. And the only thing that was changed on them was the month and date on the forms. So ultimately, I put my report together, and the prosecutor authorized on 13 different felony counts for forgery in this case, and then numerous 1-year misdemeanors for Safe Drinking Water Act violations. And then there was a plea agreement reached where the subject ended up pleading guilty to still several of the charges. You can go ahead, Bree.
Okay, so I think we've come full circle here. So we're going to talk about some lessons and you know, really wrap up that ethical what we're trying to get across with ethics here. So operators are critical for the protection of public health. And everything they do keeps that public health safe with their drinking water. So you know, engage in the field of drinking water and foster a community of excellence and integrity as an operator. Be respectful and positive. Take a find and fix approach if you see something, not a wait and see approach. So I think that really wraps up the ethics portion. And we've got a contact page here. Martin Morales, engineer in the operator training and certification unit. He presented first. Myself, Brianna Moore. I'm an analyst in operator training and certification. And James Zellinger, detective for criminal investigations for Eagle. So we're really happy to have you here today and deliver this ethics presentation. Are there any questions?